I felt like I was a bit of an outsider coming back to the iwi, and I was tested a lot. But what really got me through was that, again, remaining focused on the people and the outcomes and the benefits of what we are trying to achieve through Whakatupuranga 2050.
Tuatahi tēnei te mihi atu kia koe, o pukinga, o kawenga, ki ngā kaupapa mō te iwi nei. So as one of the CEs who have stewarded through the tribe in your time, can you just share a bit about yourself and then we'll move into the kōrero.
Tēnā koe e te tuahine. Ko wai ahau, ko pirongia te maunga, ko waipā te aua, ko mahanga haurua te apu, ko waikato, ko Ngāti Maniapoto, te iwi nei. E mihi ana ki a koe, ko Parekawhia tēnei. I'm really delighted to be here. It's actually really humbling to be able to have the opportunity to talk about the iwi, but more particularly share some of my own insights, because it was a privilege, absolutely a privilege to serve our iwi and to serve it as one of the Tumu Whakarai chief executives. So it was 2010, later in that year when I was appointed. But to be really honest, I'd only just moved home from Wellington, having spent almost 20 years in Wellington, working with different organisations, particularly close to Prime Ministers, senior ministers, Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And it was during that journey when I had the yearning to come home, that it was almost time for me. I was saying to myself, I need to get back to Waikato. My brother passed away suddenly, and within 6 months, my father did as well. So that became the catalyst for me to return home, to be near mum and my siblings. At that time too, I was involved in the foreshore seabed policy. I was part of that team. I did have some real challenges with that policy, and I knew then that I was probably going to step out of the public sector, which is exactly what I did. Got into consulting, and that gave me the drive to come home, because it doesn't matter where you are when you're consulting. So that brought me home, alongside of wanting to be close to mum. And while I was back home here, the role came up, and I saw it. And you do that kind of, do I have all of the skills? Am I ready for this leadership role? Particularly having not worked in the iwi space before. So I considered myself a bit of an outsider. That's how I considered myself at the time, that I hadn't had a close relationship with the iwi. But I put myself forward. At the time, I talked to a few close friends of mine and said, I think I'll apply for the role. Went through the process. It also ended up being quite a public process, because when it came down to the final candidates, it came out in the paper. So there was 2 of us, and that's how my mother found out. She said to me at the time, when it came out in the Waikato Times, she goes, if you had come to me and you had said you were going to apply for that role, I would have said no. And I said, Mum, why? And she goes, because I know what it's going to be like for you. But I didn't listen to her. I just went, no. I think I had my own desire to serve our iwi, and this was the opportunity. And so that's why I say I'm very humbled. I was very humbled that I was offered the role. I accepted it, and turned up to my first hui down at the chambers. Saw all of the faces. I think Robert Tukere met me because he was on Te Aratoro at that time. Tuku was the chair. They brought me in, and that was my first time in front of the tribal, the kaimahi, the ringaraupa.
Can you recall that first period of leadership with the tribe and what was happening? And
Yes, I can. I mean, it comes back to me quite quickly, really, because at that time, the iwi was going through quite a bit of it was tumultuous. Our leadership, at the governance level, was in the courts, so that was featuring on the pages, front pages of the Waikato Time on a daily basis. It had to do with employment issues with the chief executive at the time, so it was pretty volatile. But despite that, I thought, no, I would be was well prepared to come in and become the tumu whakarai. But it was a volatile time for us.
during your period of leadership, that whole concept of a longer term plan was quite important. How did you approach that objective in a way where you didn't get distracted, I think, by the election cycle of whakakitinga and then Te Aratauta,
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, one of the things we did, and which we still have now, is we report against our PO. So Whakatupuranga 2050 is very aspirational, as it should be, but it can also make you focus on many, many things to the extent where you don't prioritise. So something that we introduced at that time, during my time, was the roadmap. It was signposts. And we had a very extensive discussion with Te Whakakitinga as to what are the key measures, what are some of the measures that they want to see reported back. So we invested in that. And we now have these, what we call these, each 5 years. So we have the various PO, and they've been sort of nuanced over the years. But we started it back then, and I thought that was a great opportunity for us as an iwi to make sure we're being holding ourselves to account, both to Te Whakakitinga, but also more broadly when we're engaging with our people.
Did whakakitinga at the time have a sense of what success should look and feel like? Or was the roadmap kind of helping to steer their maturity and understanding success?
It was the beginning. It started off. And I think over time, as I look back at that time where we are now, we've certainly evolved it. And I don't know if where other iwi are at, but certainly we tried to get ahead of that, really, by having a reporting framework where we could say, what does success look like? Because we've got that broad statement, I'm committed to the kingitanga, te reo me ona tikanga strong in our language and culture, socially conscious, looking after our taiao. We have that, but when we break it down, what does that look like under all of those, against all those PO?
What was the biggest challenge you had to face as CE?
I think one of my biggest challenges that I faced, it wasn't just myself, I think it was the leadership at the time, was the faceless criticisms that came through. If I think about social media now, we were doing it ourselves back in the day. There was a blog, and you didn't know how to respond. I don't think, well, you couldn't really, because you didn't know who was making these criticisms of basically yourself. So that's probably the biggest challenge I had, but I got through that. I mean, like I said, I really, those scars on my back going through that time, it just makes you stronger.
And did you have personal coping mechanisms to deal with those types of challenges?
Oh, absolutely. Kaumātua, whaanau, mihi too. Uncle Puka, who's no longer with us, he was amazing as a kaumātua to all of us, to all the kaimahi. And so I think of him a lot going through that time, because he was very much there for the kaimahi. And Auntie Moni, Mere, you do need that because they've seen it all, been there, seen it.
And kaumātua were quite important in walking alongside your approach.
Oh, absolutely. Even my own from Mahanga Haurua. Absolutely. And last week we put to rest one of our aunties. I think of her because she was right there when I was welcomed into the iwi. And so, yes, that's my advice to any kaimahi that are coming in, particularly into the leadership roles. You need that backup.
Many will say that you brought the ideal skill set into the tribe, having worked in the public sector, understanding the machinery of government, but also complex organisations. What type of approach did you put in place to steer the waka?
Well, when I reflect back on that time, and I think change in leadership, any change in leadership, whether it's at a governance level, whether it's at the senior executive level, people watch you closely, particularly your own kaimahi. And I certainly felt that the eyes were on me, where people were watching my decisions that I'd make. Was I going to go through a big restructure? Well, I didn't. I didn't at that time because what I wanted to do first up and foremost was to get to know the people, to get to know our people that were serving the iwi in our own bureaucracy, get to know the systems that we had, make those connections with our governance, with our board, because they only have one employee, and that's the chief executive. And I think having been on a journey when it had been quite disruptive for them, I certainly didn't want to create that environment at all. I was very clear about the importance of the values that we have as an iwi, ngā mātāpono te kingitanga. Also was very clear about my own focus on the people and bringing that to my leadership of the iwi as the chief executive. So that was what I was focused on. People made decisions to either stay or go elsewhere, and I respected those decisions because it also gave me an opportunity to bring other talent into that leadership group, which I did. Not only that too, because we just settled the river claim. So when I became the chief executive, we were going through the whole co-governance, co-management. How do you give practical effect to that? So that certainly focused my attention in terms of our business that we needed to deal with at the time.
You spoke a bit about the importance of people. How did you find yourself working with other stakeholder groups within the region?
So very similar. I adopted that view that these are key relationships and partnerships, more partnerships than anything else. When I look at our settlement, we can't do it on our own. And the prosperity and the growth of the iwi is because of the partnerships that we have with many others, be it at a local government level, businesses, the private sector. We're very adept at that, and I'd like to think that I made a contribution in that space in terms of forging, particularly those local government relationships around our taiao. I don't think they were as strong as they are now, but they had to, people had to be brought along into our waka and on the journey as well.
And the river settlement would have provided the context to be able to forge into the environmental space.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I remember one of my first hui I had with my counterpart at the Waikato Regional Council at the time. And he was of the view that, we'll have a cup of tea once a month. I said, you can have a cup of tea, but that's not what we're having. We're having a genuine kōrero about the future of our awa together in partnership. So that was struck off pretty quickly on his agenda when, in fact, he had many of his councillors at that time. Some of them are still there. They understood the meaning, the significance of the river settlement.
What type of work or effort did you have to put in to the iwi? And how did you see the benefit of that during your period of leadership?
A couple of areas. One is that we grew a network of commissioners under the as part of our act. So we've got, I can't remember what the number is, but at my time we were starting to invest in that. So we've got a number of commissioners who can sit on hearings. And alongside that too, we also grew a network of kaitiaki along from the marae itself, alongside the awa. And one of the kaimahi at the time was assigned. In fact, that person worked for the Ministry of Primary Industries and they seconded him to us. And so he had all of that, he had that capability from a MPI, RMA background. He's a planner, and he worked alongside all of our marae so that they had their own kaitiaki to undertake those customary monitoring roles of the awa as well. So those are sort of the tangibles that I've seen, that investment in our people to exercise their mana motuhake alongside the awa. In addition to that, we had a number of protocols with several public service departments in Wellington, Ministry of Culture and Heritage, Department of Conservation, MFE. Many of those were formed at that time during my period under when I was the tumu whakarai. And again, they've just grown over time.
There would have been comparable examples that you have now been able to reflect on in terms of leadership required to take the tribe forward. I'm curious to know what you see as critical leadership traits in order to steer this waka forward from that role of CE.
A couple of things from my perspective. We've already touched on relationships. I think you absolutely have to be a leader that can forge relationships and maintain them, build them. The other part for me is dealing with grey areas, as I call it. Nothing's ever black and white, and being able to exercise some judgment around those grey areas. So you got to have that level of maturity to be able to make a judgment call around what that might be. I think absolutely having some strategic nous and looking long term, because we are intergenerational, and being able to contribute to the strategic direction. It's not solely for the te arotaura or the boards to do. I think you need a chief executive that can contribute in that space. The other part for me too, and it's more about the inside of the business, so having really a solid understanding of systems and processes, because ultimately you are accountable for having a really functioning health and safety, well-being policy framework, and these others as well that you need to have. So it's being able to lead the people, it's being able to build relationships, it's having some strategic nous, but also that systems building and maintenance of those systems. Because if anything happens, like we've just had the Tainui Games, if there had been an incident, then it would have come back to the CEO and the board.
Well, de-risking issues is quite core to a CE's role, finding ways to do that. So were there any issues that challenged you, and how did you approach them during your time as CE?
I think one of the as CEO, I look back at, well, compared to where we are now in terms of people and capability, we certainly didn't have the numbers of people that we had at the time. That wasn't a bad thing at all. It just was the situation at the time. So, what I figured out then that, we had to either bring some more resources in with different capability or different skill sets, which we did at the time. And that's always going to be challenging, getting that right balance. And then the other part for me too was delivering on whakatupuranga 2050 because of how ambitious it was. So, we didn't have a lot of breathing space to get things done, and get that done not just by ourselves, but bringing people on, bringing our marae on as well.
As a strategic leader, it's your responsibility to grow people and talent within the organisation. Were there particular areas of emphasis that you wanted to focus on during your time as Tumu Whakarai?
I think for me it was more about building on people's strengths, because everyone comes in with a set of strengths. So I'm very much focused on that part as opposed to taking what are their gaps and learnings and deficits. So when I look back at that time, the leadership team, they all had their own unique set of strengths, which we played to build on those. The other part for me is, you're just one person as the tumu whakarai. In order to be, I guess, successful, you've got to have everyone else around you to be part of that collaboration, that kotahitanga, in terms of driving forward a strategy direction. So again, I was very, very much focused on making sure we were a tight team of leaders, that everybody had a job to do. They did it well, and they took their own teams along with them. So and that took probably a good sort of 6 to 12 months to build that, and that consistency of behaviours. But I'm really proud because many of those leaders at that time have gone off to other roles outside of the iwi.
In terms of ensuring that the relationship between whakakitinga, Te Atairangikaahu and yourself, how did you approach that challenge?
Yeah, that was a biggie for me because when I first started going to Te Whakakitinga hui, I used to get really anxious about it. Only because there was, like I said before, there was we're an iwi with amazing leaders. We really are, and we've built them, or they've just come into their leadership space. But that dynamic, though, if you are somebody as I described myself, I felt like I was a bit of an outsider coming back to the iwi, and I was tested a lot. But what really got me through was that, again, remaining focused on the people and the outcomes and the benefits of what we are trying to achieve through Whakatupuranga 2050. So I always kind of maintained that approach. I stayed really pono to that. And I don't think I wavered too much, but I also had too many times when I was into whakakitinga. I just had to go and put a bubble around myself. As I was being, attacked, or someone would say something. But when I look back at those times, Nanaya, that's getting the scars on my back has actually made me a better person and a better leader. And because I've had the privilege to serve in Te Whakakitinga as well, it has made me think, I was meant to go through that at that time to be able to emerge and continue to evolve as a leader. But no, it was challenging, definitely, absolutely.
And you deployed the same skills for managing the relationship with Te Atairangikaahu and the expectations that came from Te Atairangikaahu?
Oh, absolutely. I think the challenge for me then was that I went through, if I recall, I think I had 4 different chairs in my tenure. So that's quite a lot in terms of a turnover when you've got chairs turning over. But regardless of that, I kept my focus on maintaining those relationships, a constructive, open, transparent relationship, focused on outcomes for our people.
In terms of the relationship between the tribal entity and TGH, what were your observations coming into the iwi and looking at that tension?
So when I came in, we had a shared services arrangement with Tainui Group Holdings. That changed though over time, and much of it changed because Mike Pōhio, the CEO at the time, he and I decided to, again, using that whole focus on relationships, the need to work together for the benefit of our people, I deliberately reached out and forged a relationship with Mike. I saw ourselves as peers. Neither one was bigger or better than the other. We were there to work for and on behalf of our people. So, and I can say this, that Mike and I had a very productive, constructive working relationship. We changed up that service, shared service agreement by bringing some of that capability within the tribal side, and I know it's growing even further. We also made changes to what we called at the time, there wasn't an agreement between the two entities. It was almost like Tainui Group Holdings was in their own bubble, getting on, making the money, but there wasn't a lot of alignment between the Whakatupuranga 2050 and our commercial. So there was quite a lot of effort put into bringing ourselves together, being more kotahitanga. The single Hui a Tau came out during that period, the single report, because again, we used to have two events. Tainui Group Holdings report their annual report, financials. We do the same. Now we've integrated that to a single reporting function, if I describe it that way. Yes, there was tension, but I think certainly it has improved. There's more to be done though. We've now got the Group Investment Committee. We have a letter of expectation, and other tools that we use. I know that certainly the current leadership is meeting regularly. More of that has to happen on an ongoing basis.
I want to move to the politics because Waikato's very different from other iwi in that we have the settlement and a big organisation, and we also have the kingitanga and the interface between the kingitanga and the tribe. How did you navigate, the kingitanga aspects as well as Waikato-centric aspects?
I mean, that's a great part-time, and that's something that I guess when you're born into the movement, you take it as serving the kingitanga, serving the king and now our queen. I did it in different ways, really. I made sure I had a working relationship with the head of the kawiariki, and I always took the approach that both to listen, but also if I felt that the advice was needed or guidance. And I think I take that because of my own training when I've had to do that. I mean, it's different. It's not apples and apples, but certainly when I've given advice to prime ministers in the past and other leaders, I also kind of took a little bit of that into my relationship with the kingitanga. So if there were things that I felt could be done differently, certainly I would speak up, but not in a public way. I'd always do that directly when it was Kingi Tuahetia. And I would probably I know I would do it the same way too with our Queen. So that's how I managed that dynamic with the kingitanga.
In terms of the expectations of the kingitanga and the responsibilities back to the people of Waikato, again, are they one and the same or are they slightly different? How did you view those aspects of the relationship?
Oh, look, it's one of the same, but different, I suppose. And over the years, as I've gone to many, many pokai, you kind of see that at times it merges, and then sometimes you said, no, this is for the kingitanga, this is for the iwi. Given our kaitiaki role that we play as Waikato, it's important that we always remember that is the role that we have in terms of our service to the kingitanga. So I guess that for me, that's what distinguishes it at the end of the day.
The tribe has continued to grow and grow and grow. and the aspiration at this moment is around mana motuhake. If you were to look back at our 30-year journey of the settlement, how might we consider mana motuhake going forward?
Well, I'm a big believer in devolution, and I've seen it work elsewhere. So eventually I would like to see more of what is being undertaken at the centre. I'll just use it like that sort of describe it in that way, being enabled and devolved out to our marae, whether it's a cluster of marae, a grouping of marae, or marae that are able to do things on their own, and I can think of a number that are like that, then I think that's the pathway forward as well. There will always be a need to keep things centralised, but we have to figure out what that is. But I think the core, I'd like to think the inui from several of our marae and members, iwi members, is that more needs to go out so that our own people can start to control their own destiny and determine what that looks like. The iwi, however, has done a great job at that. That's not a criticism at all, but I think going forward, I'd like to see us at the marae level being given more opportunities to do that. Some marae are already doing it.
Some marae are already doing it. And if we take it that building capacity of marae is quite a natural thing, especially when times get tough. You see the marae coming around and, providing that real structure and strength and resilience for whānau. I'm also curious to know, when you were the CE, how did you interact with government agencies in your new role for a tribal organisation, and your former peers?
I know. Well, it probably took up at least 50% of my time. I seemed to be in Wellington a lot of time, largely because they were wanting to forge partnerships with the iwi as a consequence of the river settlement. But also I think the whole movement forward in Wellington, and again it's changed, at that time was partnerships, relationships with iwi. So not just with us, with Ngāi Tahu, and other iwi that had settled recently that time.
Did you interact with other Māori CEs who were leading their tribal organisations in terms of, was there a formal network? Or?
Yes. The iwi Chairs, National Iwi Chairs Forum. So we also started at that time a forum for chief executives. And so we would get together. I recall hosting one of the hui here at the college, Arehia Bennett, who was the chief executive of Ngāi Tahu at the time. She did the same. Herawini Te Koha, he was the CEO at Ngāti Porou, and he did something similar too. So there was quite a lot of collaboration, sharing of ideas amongst ourselves at that time.
And were there kind of opportunities to provide that strategic network with, I guess, some tools to be able to deal with the complexities that are primarily, they only exist in tribal organisations?
Yeah, we did. We did our very best at that time too. Part of that sharing process was to think about, okay, how could we, like, for example, we all had the same issues about capacity and capability. So how about we share some of that amongst ourselves? So, that's why, and I think Donna was the same too, is why we had our kaimahi in different forums, particularly in the National Iwi Chairs space. But also at other times when government was undertaking a review, we made sure we had some really good minds and people involved. It didn't matter which iwi you were at. As chief executives, we thought, well, how about this person? Let's give them the experience. Let's put them into this working group. So we certainly did do that at the time.
One of the traits of your personal leadership style is to grow people. And if you were to give advice to young professionals out there wanting to go into an organisation like a tribal one, what type of advice would you be giving them?
First advice I would give them is don't rush. Don't rush to your iwi, first of all. Go out, and explore the world, go out and do other things first. And I say that because you will bring that experience, that lived experience with you into the iwi. Because once you're in the iwi, it's for life. So, that's been my advice to some that have asked me about, I want to get into the iwi. How do I do that? And I'll go to them, no, stay where you are for the time being. Spend a little bit more time there. And then think about coming to the iwi. If you are working in the iwi, I think it's really important to have some mentors, making sure you're well supported. And I like to think that many of our kaimahi do have that. They've got that support wrapped around them. Challenge yourself. So if you may be in one team, look at what other experience you can gain by shifting into another team. Do that and make sure you're learning. The other thing is obviously investing in your own professional development. There are some wonderful programs, international programs as well, for our rangatahi to think about doing.
Do you think the tribe is doing enough to ensure that there's transferability of these types of experiences so that we can continue to grow the leadership that exists within the tribe?
Well, to date, I'm really proud that, I think with the exception of one, that the tumu whakarai role has been held by a tribal member. And I think we should acknowledge that. I think we can do more though. We should always be looking at what more can we do for those coming through our own pipeline. And, like I said, giving them a diversity of experience and also enabling them if there are opportunities elsewhere to support them to do that, to second them away and then bring them back again.
And during your tenure as a leader, in the role of CE, what are you most proud of?
I'm really proud of the people, and I'm talking here about our kaimahi, because many are still within the iwi, and so, I know without a doubt they are committed to serving. I'm very proud of those that have taken up other opportunities because they've also gone into other leadership roles. I'm really proud that Whakatupuranga 2050 has continued to evolve, but is our tribal blueprint that we're working off. I'm really proud that, because I sit in Te Whakakitingo Waikato now, and I look around and I see the new leadership, the younger ones coming through, and I'm really proud of them, even in my own marae, because they're just going to be, we talk about succession planning. We have it already. I can see them. They're really active. So I'm very proud of that too. Apart from all the other programs that we do and the investments we've made. So it's mostly, those are the things I'm really proud of.
I want to move to Te Taha Wairua and how you approach building culture where that is symbiotic with the type of way people feel about where they work and how they contribute, not being taken for granted, but, being valued. Te Taha Wairua has something to do with that. And I'd just really be interested in your approach.
Hi, tika tō pātai. That's probably why I brought a whare when I came back right next to the awa, because I go there every morning and have my karakia. And that's so important for me. But I've also been studying the maramataka in the last 12 to 18 months. So I'm very mindful. I even looked today what the maramataka said, and I thought, this is a good day to have a interview with you, Nanaya. So I really keep that at the forefront. But it's not just my taha wairua. I have all the, taha hinengaro, taha whānau, taha tinana. My tinana yesterday was tested because I was in the Tainui Games for the whole weekend.
Tawa.
Had a few aches and pains, but my wairua is, it's certainly, as a leader of any iwi organisation, you've got to pay attention to that. You must, because that is what gets you through the challenges.
Was there ever a time where you were out of kilter and you needed to be reset?
Yes, during probably my second or third year of, I had a health scare. Yeah. And I knew too that something wasn't quite right. So I knew I had to, bring that balance back into my life really. So which I did, and that's when that's why I think of Uncle Puka, because he helped me through that time. And then a couple of years after that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So, but I was much stronger though when I was diagnosed with breast cancer the second time round. And so that was, I think I had just left the iwi. Yeah, I just left as the tumu whakarai. So that meant, I've spent the last sort of couple of years going on that journey, and getting through that. So I've got through that for the time being. Mm.
And you've been an inspiration to a lot of women who have seen your journey and walked alongside you, and you've continued to grow other young women. Mm-hmm. So I think I just want to mihi you. It's been inspirational for many. I was hoping that you might share a little bit of your insight and your lived experience around, without talking about individuals, but you have dealt with a lot of complex individuals, and whether you've got techniques or ways of, because you're very relational, are there ways of dealing with complex individuals, especially when they're in the leadership positions?
Absolutely. I'm happy to share that with you. I think in my time, what I have found that works really well is to be upfront with those individuals. So I try to be quite transparent about it. Sometimes and I sort of check on myself sometimes, because I think, have I done the right thing here? And sometimes I haven't, I know that, so I accept when I may have come up short, when I haven't engaged with particular leaders when I needed to, and I accept that. But on the whole, I'm one that will always reach out to that person, and I'll either say to them, look, this is happening in the background. Have you thought about this? What you're thinking about this. And I'll always try to explain it in a way why I think, it may not work, or you may need to think about this differently. I think over the years, because I've built up those relationships with different leaders, in fact, I'd like to think that I've built up that trust to be able to talk frankly with people. So that's helped me. I think the other thing too is, was reflecting on this last year when we were going through our elections, and I got elected onto Te Arautau. And at that particular time, there was lots of, who's going to be the chair and who's not getting all of that, which we're really good at doing too, people getting the numbers. I chose not to do that. I deliberately chose no, I'm not going to get involved in that dynamic, because it is a numbers game. I understand it's a numbers game. I decided to sit back, and I actually had some other commitments anyway that prevented me from putting myself forward. I was really open about that, very open at the time, including telling the King, and others that were wanting to be the chair. And I said, no, that's not for me. And no, I'm not going to back people, get the numbers. See, let's see. You all have the opportunity to put your kōrero to us. So I'd like to play that kind of straight game, be straight up and down. And I remember saying it to Te Arautau last year in our strategy, we need to think differently about how we put into our leadership roles. Why don't we wānanga it? Why do we, have to have our kahuiariki rep come in, hold a hui, go for the vote? Let's take our time. Let's think differently about that. We've only just all been elected into the leadership space. Let's see who's the best fit for for a particular role. So for me, it's about changing that up, doing something different.
So how might we consider creating the kind of culture where it is a wānanga? Do we have the governance maturity to be able to, I think in some ways, be magnanimous enough to know when you haven't got the skills to put someone in there that does have the skills, or at least the relational brokering around the type of leadership required for a time? Are we ever going to get there?
Oh, I'm that forever optimist. I'm always like that. I'd like to think we can get there, Nanaya. We have to for our future generations. We need to be the best that we can. And I really do. I'd like to think that we can get there. We've come this far. And so there's the opportunity for us. And as leaders, we need to be the first to be able to demonstrate that, so that those that are coming behind us, and they're right behind us, can see there's a different way of operating, a different tikanga that gets us there, that continues to make us move forward.
On the moving forward, for the next 30 years, what would you hope to see?
Oh, so I'm thinking of doing my PhD on the next 30 years, and I want to talk to those of our iwi members who are under the age of 30 to really get their vision. So for me, for the next 30 years, I do think we need to absolutely look at our governance structure again. We attempted to do that in the last term and last year. There's an opportunity for us to reset that, and I think we should. We need to certainly look at what devolution looks like, and that may not be the word, but what does that mean? What does mana motuhake really look like for us at a marae level? Let's start that mahi, and I know the tribe is doing that now. The leadership, well, now's the time to start bringing in the next generation of leaders into Te Aratora, to whakakitenga. I'm starting to see that, because I'd like to think that some of them will be around, they will be 10, 20, 30 years' time. We should also not continue to look for the government. We tend to, depending on who the leader is, that relationship with the Crown. I think that we should be putting that as second order and really focusing in on what we are doing as an iwi, and in partnership with others. I think that we spend too much time in terms of looking at that relationship with the government. And if anything, the Treaty Principles Bill there's one positive from it, because I've seen and heard many of the submissions, is that how do we foster our own rangatiratanga in this time and mana motuhake going forward. It's been wonderful to see that and hear it. So to those that wish to be on my PhD, part of my PhD study, I'll be reaching out to you.
Well, we could be working together on our PhD effort. In terms of healing ourselves forward as an iwi, because we've had some really challenging times and there's lots of learning, I think, like you, that it's time now to change it up, move forward, and heal the past so that we can move confidently forward. What could we be focusing more on to ensure that we're not going to replicate the mistakes of the past?
That's a tough question, because fundamentally it comes down to, I think, your own behaviour and how you behave, how you relate to others. And so if we are truly pono to mana enhancing behaviour, then, we wouldn't be, and I've seen it, be putting down people. We would really be, again, that's why I said earlier on about focusing on people's gifts and their strengths. What is it that they bring in their service to the iwi, and allowing them to be nurtured and grow in that space, whether it's as a kaikaranga, kai waiata, whether it's our kai kōrero, whatever, tumu whakarai, wrapping yourselves around them. Because if we don't see the change in behaviours or conduct, then our tamariki, our mokopuna, will just think that's the norm. But it isn't, and it shouldn't be, and it must not be. going into the next 30 years. So that's my, I guess, tono to us as leaders. Let's start behaving better. Let's start demonstrating the aroha to each other, manaakitanga, to everyone else.
With your extensive experience in the public sector and then coming back to the tribe, you would have met a whole lot of different leaders. I'm curious to know whether you had any engagement directly with Jim Bolger.
I did. So Jim was the Prime Minister when I was in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. I've got a huge amount of respect for Jim, and I know he's not well at the moment. When the settlement in 1995 took place at Turangawawa, I was overseas. I was studying in the States. But every time I look back at those images and the times that I've had the opportunity to be alongside Jim, he's a man of integrity, and also, acknowledge his leadership and Sir Douglas Graham, Bill Butch, Simon Upton. There was a whole lot of them in the day who really had the courage to settle our Raupatu claim. They could have decided to leave it and left it for the next government, but it speaks to his own integrity that he knew it was the right thing to do. And when I worked with him in the advisory group under Simon Murdoch, he was the chief executive at the time, we'd go up to his office and give advice to him, and I had different portfolios. I didn't have Māori affairs at the time. I had lots of different portfolios, which I had the opportunity to brief him on.
And how did you find engaging with him and his leadership style? What did you observe?
Jim's a people person. He is a master at it too. I also saw that when I went on to the Council for Te Whare Wānanga Waikato, sort of in his last couple of months as the Chancellor, very relaxed, very similar in a way to Koro Wetere and Parekawhia McLean and others, was able to have a conversation with at ease, and he'd make you at ease. So Jim was able to do that really, really well.
You used the word courage quite deliberately, I suspect, because of his leadership style and what was required to get the settlement over the line. Did you ever observe Jim staring his own colleagues down, without giving away cabinet secrets or anything? But, it takes a certain amount of grit to just carry on. And you know that the tensions are real with your colleagues. Yes,
I did see that. I did. Because I think the Minister of Finance at the time was Ruth Richardson. So that's why I use that term courage, because I don't think if we, I think if we thought about it, should we ever think at the time it would be a national-led government that would begin the settlement of historical treaty claims. So, and that's why I say, Jim, and he's got a very strong faith, his Catholic faith, doing the right thing, I think probably had a part to play in it. But he did. He was very strong in his conviction about settling the Waikato Raupatu claim. And I think he took, as somebody who had that real common touch, what I observed of him around the cabinet table and in cabinet committee meetings was very firm. And when he made the call, he'd explain himself, and that was it. The decision was made. So, and he had to. He really had to. It wasn't just around his cabinet table. It was across the local government, councils, the private sector, all of those different forums that he engaged with, federated farmers, all those groups. I remember him telling me that story. He went to a National Federated Farmers conference around about the time of the settlement. Negotiations were going on, and he had to steer them down. And many of them were, I guess, friends of his that go way back.
That's the quality of his leadership. He just stood on his principles.
Yep.
Yeah. And what about Tā Tipene? Did you have much to do with him?
Yes. So through the Sea Lords settlement, I was working in the Minister of Fisheries office at the time with Doug Kidd. And so I observed at that time, I was sitting around those tables with Sir Tipene, your father, Api, Mahuika, Archie Tairo, David Higgins from Naitahu. There was that core group that were negotiating the settlement, the Sea Lord deal. And so and Machu Rata was the other one. In fact, it was Machu that was leading the negotiations, and on either side was your dad and Sir Tipene. So I got to see that up really close and personal, that leadership. Sir Tipene, very sharp, very astute in terms of politics, but also his analysis of the situation at the time.
And the relationship with Te Ata, did you have much to do with Te Ata?
Yep, I had a little bit to do with Te Arikinui, Te Atairangikaahu, probably more towards sort of the mid to later part of her life. But I certainly got to see her in Wellington. There were times when, particularly with Parekawhia, because they had a close, Parekawhia was very close to Te Arikinui, Te Atairangikaahu, and also with Kingi Tuheitia. So there were times when she'd visit the office and he'd have her in there and they'd be having a kōrero about mostly what was happening nationally, national affairs, what was happening either in the whare, in Parliament. Yes, so no, I did get to see that relationship as well.
In terms of female leaders that you took inspiration from, do you want to share any insights on other women that you kind of look to, or the traits that you look to?
Well, absolutely. Te Puea, Te Arikinui, Te Atairangikaahu. Te Puea, because of her, again, that courage and drive that she had, mahi a te mahi hei painga mo te iwi. And at that time too, when it was, in her time, in her leadership, she was an entrepreneur. She led the revival of the kingitanga, the build of Mahinarangi, Te Atairangikaahu, because of given her, again, emphasis on relationships across the Pacific, internationally. And then, I guess, currently, I look at you, I look at the likes of Tania Simpson, the governance roles that Tania has had. My mum, absolutely. When I think of my own whānau, my mum, my grandmother, my aunties.
I want to spend some time on your mum because often their stories don't get shared at all. But if you were to reflect on your mum's leadership qualities and all the innate qualities that you draw inspiration from, what does that look like?
So mum brought us all up, 8 tamariki. And I think what I most loved about mum was that despite that, she she reminded us of who we are. We never ever lost sight of being mahanga haurua, being from whatawhata, going to the local school at whatawhata. That's what I draw from my mum, was that we never ever forgot our own identity. The other thing with mum and dad too is that they never had the opportunities to go out to the world and be educated. Both of them ended up having to look after their siblings. So mum never got beyond, I think, what's it now, probably Form 3. And yet she wrote every day. She would write every day. And I always think about what would she have been had she been able to go off to university and all of that. So that's why education was so important for her. She was adamant we didn't have a choice, that we were going to be educated. Didn't matter what we were going to do. We were going to stay at school and then go off to university and so on. So that's why of the 8 of us, 4 of us have gone off to university and done different things. So that's the other part for my mother. And also just her caring for others. She was very good with whakapapa. I'm not very good on whakapapa, but Mum would always make the connections. She would tell me, this is so-and-so, this is how we're connected. And so I've learnt that from her. I remember all of those times where I'd go with her to the marae and she'd tell me how this person was connected to us. So she was very much that connector, whakapapa person in our whānau. Many of my cousins came to see my mother for that. Mm.
Is there a favourite food or song that you can remember that she loved?
Oh, Dad played the guitar and he also played in bands. So the song that my mum and dad loved to play, which we all know and all our mokopuna know, is Me He Manurere, a love song. Because that was my mum and dad's love song to each other. So when they both passed, we sang Me He Manurere to both of them.
Oh,
at their tangihanga.
Beautiful. Well, e mihi ana kia koe, mo tēnei wāhanga ki te whakaniko te tāhuhu kōrero mo tēnei whare tō tātou nei iwi. Nō reira, i raro e te tūmanako o ngā mātua tūpuna kia haumaru i a koe, me tō haere, mihi ana.
Tēnā koe.
Thank you.
Mihi.